Somewhere in your pantry is probably a block of dried ramen noodles that cost less than $1, and you have been treating it like garbage. Most people rip open the packet, dump it in boiling water, and call it dinner. But in my grandmother Yuki's kitchen, that same 50-cent brick was the starting point for something built with more precision than restaurant meals you've paid $40 for. 28 tricks are coming. Everything from the temperature that keeps a stock from turning bitter and slimy to the 10 minutes that make a crushed clove of garlic taste like a different ingredient. Stay for number 5 especially. It will change how you eat ramen for the rest of your life. Let's count down. Number 28, the blood letting soak. Building a pork bone broth for your ramen from nothing, resist the urge to drop the bones straight into the pot. Submerge them in cold water first, an hour up to 4, changing the water once if it turns pink. Japanese home cooks have done this for generations before a bone meets heat. Here's why it works. Water always moves toward balance. So soaking pulls blood and impurities out of the bone into the surrounding water before they'd otherwise cook into your broth. The payoff is a base with none of that metallic, gamey edge waiting to ruin 12 hours of simmering. Number 27, the violent blanch. When those bones come out of their soak, boil them hard for 10 to 15 minutes in fresh water before your real broth starts. You'll see gray, ugly foam rise almost immediately. Skim it off, then scrub the bones clean. The reason is simple, that foam is coagulated blood and protein, and hard heat forces it to seize and separate from the bone the instant it hits a rolling boil. Skip this and it boils invisibly into your final soup. Do it right, and you're left with a base that tastes like pork instead of a barnyard. Number 26, the roast before the boil. Building a shoyu or miso-style broth rather than tonkotsu, roast your bones in a hot oven 30 to 40 minutes before they touch water, until deeply browned, almost caramelized. This is a trick Japanese ramen shops borrowed from French and Chinese stock making. What's happening is the Maillard reaction, the same chemistry that browns a seared steak, unlocking nutty, roasted compounds from the bone's natural sugars and proteins that plain boiling could never produce. The payoff is a broth with a deeper, almost toasted backbone underneath the pork. Number 25, the katsui snap. If you've wondered why ramen noodles have that springy bite regular pasta doesn't, the answer is a splash of alkaline mineral water called kanzui, traditionally sodium and potassium carbonate mixed into the dough. Noodle makers across Japan and China have relied on this for centuries, tracing back to alkaline lakes in Inner Mongolia. This comes down to pH. The alkaline environment tightens and cross-links the gluten proteins in the flour, making the strands firmer and more elastic than a neutral dough could. That's why ramen noodles hold their chew even after minutes in hot broth instead of turning to mush. Number 24, the soft water rule. Making dashi or cooking noodles, pay attention to your water, not just ingredients. Soft, filtered water pulls flavor out cleanly, while hard water loaded with calcium and magnesium works against you. Careful ramen makers have quietly followed this rule for as long as dashi has existed. Here's the reason. Those mineral ions bind to glutamate before it dissolves, which blocks the reaction that makes dashi's stacked umami possible. Switch to filtered water, and the same kombu suddenly tastes noticeably more savory. Number 23, the 60-85 handshake. This is the real backbone of Japanese cooking, and Yuki treated it like scripture. Bring kombu to about 60 degrees Celsius and pull it out the moment it gets there, never letting it simmer. Then take the liquid to around 85 degrees Celsius, kill the heat, and drop in dried bonito flakes for 30 seconds before straining. Scientists Kikunai Ikeda and his student Shintaro Kodama figured out why this works. Kombu releases glutamate, bonito releases inosinate, and when those two meet, the umami created has been measured at up to 8 times stronger than either alone. Number 22, boil hard, simmer soft. Whether your broth turns out cloudy and creamy or clean and golden comes down to how hard it boils. Tonkatsu wants a violent rolling boil for 8 to 12 hours. Shoyu or shio wants a bare simmer, wisps of steam, no rolling bubbles. Here's what's happening beneath the surface. A hard boil shatters fat into microscopic droplets that gelatin, then suspends through the liquid, creating an emulsion, while a gentle simmer lets that fat float and skim off cleanly. Same bones, two different bowls. Now, those first 7 covered what happens before the broth hits a bowl, but stay with me, the real transformation is still ahead. Especially number 9, when a spoonful of scorched blackened garlic turns an ordinary tonkatsu into something you won't forget. Number 21, the week-old tare. Whatever base you're building, shio, shoyu, or miso, resist using it the same day you make it. Mix your tare, soy sauce, mirin, sake, and sugar, or a salt-based blend, bottle it, and let it sit in the fridge a full week. This is the same aging process behind traditional soba kaishi, carried into ramen kitchens generations ago. The reason is simple. Time lets the sharp, raw edges of soy sauce and alcohol mellow chemically while flavors settle into each other. A tare made on a Sunday tastes deeper by the following weekend. Number 20, the niboshi handshake. This was the one Yuki never skipped. Along with your kombu, steep a small handful of niboshi, dried baby sardines, into your tare or dashi for 20 minutes up to overnight. Yuki kept a jar on her counter and tossed a few in without measuring. Here's why it works. Kombu is loaded with glutamate and niboshi brings inosinate. And when those two combine, the umami produced doesn't just add up, it multiplies. That's the same synergy Japanese scientists mapped out over a century ago. Still, the backbone of a proper ramen broth. Number 19, the third umami. Most people know glutamate and stop there, but there's a third player worth knowing, guani latte, concentrated in dried shiitake mushrooms. Drop 2 or 3 into your simmering broth or tare and let them rehydrate 20 minutes. Japanese cooks have leaned on dried shiitake for depth for centuries, often without naming the reason. Here's the reason. Guani latte produces an even stronger synergy with glutamate than inosinate does, with research putting the boost as high as 30 times glutamate's umami alone. It's how a handful of dried mushrooms makes a broth taste inexplicably richer. Number 18, one broth, 3 bowls. Professional ramen shops rarely season their broth directly. Instead, they keep one pot of stock and a separate lineup of tares, shio, shoyu, and miso, combining them in the bowl at the last moment. You can do the same at home with one weekend stock. This comes down to timing. Keeping the glutamate-rich tare and inosinate-rich broth apart lets each develop fully on its own, so their combined umami hits full strength right as they're poured together, not cooked flat for hours. Number 17, miso never boils. Making a miso-style broth, stir the tare in during the final 2 to 3 minutes and never return the pot to a hard boil after. Quality ramen kitchens guard this timing closely. Here's why it matters. Miso is fermented, and its glutamate-rich compounds, along with delicate aromatics fermentation created, break down fast under sustained heat. Add it early and boil it hard, and you flatten the umami synergy you were building against the broth's inosinate. Add it last and gently, and the bowl tastes rounder and more alive. Number 16, the corn and butter handshake. A cold night favorite in Yuki's kitchen, straight from Hokkaido's Sapporo-style miso ramen. Top a rich miso broth with a spoonful of sweet corn and a full pat of butter, placed on the surface so it melts slowly as you eat. Ramen shops in Japan's coldest prefecture have served it this way since the style was invented in the 1950s. Here's why it works. The butter's fat forms a floating layer that slows heat loss, while the corn's sugar balances the miso's saltiness instead of piling richness on richness. Number 15. The warm bowl rule. Before assembling anything, fill your serving bowl with boiling water and let it sit about a minute, then pour it out right before building your ramen. It's a small habit passed down in home kitchens for as long as ramen has been served there. The reason is straightforward. A cold bowl pulls heat out of your broth within seconds, while a pre-warmed bowl acts as extra thermal mass, keeping your bowl noticeably hotter for longer. It sounds too simple to matter, and it changes the entire eating experience. Now, those 7 were the architecture underneath every bowl, but don't go anywhere. Everything from here forward is toppings and finishing work, and number 4 is going to change how fast you eat ramen for the rest of your life. Number 14, the cold set. Once your chashu finishes its long braise, don't slice it warm no matter how tempting it looks. Let it cool completely, ideally overnight, still wrapped in its braising liquid. Ramen shops chill every piece before it touches a knife. Here's the reason. The collagen that turned into silky gelatin during the braise needs to firm up cold to hold its shape for clean slices, and cooling lets the meat reabsorb more of the marinade's flavor than it could while hot. Slice it warm and it falls apart, losing both texture and teat. Number 13, the overnight soak. This is Yuki's ajitama, the marinated egg she made almost every week. Soft boil eggs about 7 minutes, then shock in cold water. Peel gently, then submerge fully in soy sauce, mirin, and sake for 6 hours up to overnight. Yuki always left hers exactly overnight, never longer. Here's why it works. The marinade moves through the egg white by simple diffusion, traveling from higher concentration toward lower, slowly working toward the yolk. The payoff is a jammy, amber-stained egg seasoned all the way through instead of just on the surface. Number 12, the fermented crunch. Menma, those pale, tangy strips in nearly every serious bowl of ramen, start life as lacto-fermented bamboo shoots, boiled, salted, and left to ferment for weeks before drying and rehydrating. Japanese ramen shops treat it as an essential topping. Here is what is happening. The lactic acid bacteria driving that fermentation are the same family behind pickles and yogurt, transforming the bamboo's flavor from bland and vegetal into something tangy and complex. That built-in tang cuts through a rich, fatty tonkotsu broth, resetting your palate between bites instead of stacking richness. Number 11, the scorched garlic trick. This is Yuki's mayu, made by smell rather than by timer. Mince garlic finely, cook it slowly in neutral oil until completely black, not golden, then blend smooth with a splash of sesame oil. Ramen shops serving tonkotsu and hakata treat this as a signature finishing condiment. Here's why it works. That transformation from raw to black is the Maillard reaction at full intensity, the same chemistry behind a seared steak, unlocking smoky, almost truffle-like compounds plain garlic could never produce. Just half a tablespoon changes the entire character of a bowl. Number 10, the 10-minute rest. Whenever a recipe calls for garlic, raw or headed into hot oil, mince or crush it, then let it sit about 10 minutes before use. Cooks across Japan and China have quietly followed this timing for generations. The reason is enzymatic. Crushing garlic brings an enzyme called alliinase into contact with a compound called alliin for the first time. And that reaction needs a few minutes to fully convert into allicin, the compound behind garlic's real punch. Skip the rest and toss it straight into hot oil, and you lose flavor before it develops. Number 9, the oil on top. This is the one I promised earlier. Just before serving, ladle a spoonful of aroma oil, whether rendered pork fat, scallion oil, or garlic oil, onto the surface of the finished broth. Ramen shops treat this final layer as non-negotiable. Here's why it works. Fat is a far better carrier for aromatic compounds than water, so that floating layer releases scent the instant it hits hot broth, while acting as an insulating cap that slows heat loss underneath. It's why ramen smells completely different the moment it reaches your table. Number 8, the red oil trick. Ryu, Japan's version of chili oil, is made by steeping dried chilies in hot oil until the color turns a deep demonic red. Drizzle it over any broth that needs more edge, tonkotsu especially. Ramen shops keep a bottle right next to the mayu for a reason. Here's the reason. Capsaicin, the compound responsible for a chili's heat, is fat-soluble rather than water-soluble, so oil extracts and carries its spiciness far more efficiently than broth alone. A few drops go a long way, and overdoing it drowns out everything else you built. Now stay with me, the final stretch is where this list really earns the word insane. And number 1 is the exact bowl my grandmother Yuki never once let leave her kitchen without. Number 7, the 10-second pull. When your noodles are cooking, pull them from the water 10 to 20 seconds before the package time says they're done. Then drain hard with no rinsing. Ramen cooks treat package timing as a rough guide, never gospel. Here's why it works. Noodles keep cooking from residual heat even after leaving the pot, and the moment they hit hot broth, they keep absorbing liquid and softening. Pull them at exactly the package time, and by the time you're eating, they've crossed from springy into mushy without you noticing. Number 6, the noodle dip. Right before your first bite, use your chopsticks to lift the noodles up through the floating oil layer, not straight up from underneath. This is second nature to anyone who grew up eating ramen at a counter in Japan. Here's why it matters. Fat holds onto aromatic compounds far more efficiently than the broth beneath it, so noodles pulled through that layer arrive already coated in concentrated aroma, delivering flavor before the broth touches your tongue. It's a tiny motion that changes the first impression of the entire bowl. Number 5, the meeting point. Building the bowl, order matters more than most realize. Warm bowl first, tare next, hot broth poured directly over it, then noodles, then toppings, always in that sequence. Ramen shops follow this order without exception, bowl after bowl, all night. Here's why it matters. This is the moment your glutamate-rich tare and inosinate-rich broth are finally allowed to combine. And pouring broth over the tare, rather than the reverse, mixes the two evenly before the noodles go in. Get the order wrong, and the seasoning never distributes the same way. Number 4, the race against the broth. Once your bowl is assembled, eat it. Now. Not in 10 minutes, not after you finish scrolling your phone. Ramen culture in Japan treats a bowl of noodles as something to finish quickly, almost urgently. Here's the reason. Noodles sitting in hot broth keep absorbing liquid and swelling the entire time they're in contact with it. So the springy noodle you started with turns soft, bloated, and waterlogged the longer it sits. A bowl eaten in the first few minutes and the same bowl 20 minutes later are, texturally, nearly 2 different dishes. Now for the final 3. These aren't tricks anymore. These are the ones Yuki would never let leave her kitchen without. If you remember nothing else from this video, remember these 3. Number 3, the double soup handshake. This comes from Asahikawa in Hokkaido, where ramen shops brew a rich meat-based stock and a dried seafood dashi separately. Then combine the two just before serving, a method cooks call W soup. It's more work than one pot, and every serious shop does it anyway. Here's why it works. Building each stock on its own lets you push the meat side as far as it can go without ruining the delicate fish notes, and the reverse. So combining them stacks a full-strength glutamate base against a full-strength inosinate base, not a compromise of both. Number 2, the luxury nucleotide stack. Yuki's move when she wanted to impress someone at the table. Add a small handful of dried scallop or shrimp into a kombu and noboshi dashi, letting it steep alongside everything else. She kept a jar of dried shrimp specifically for this, only reaching for it on special occasions. Here's why it works. Dried scallop and shrimp are dense with their own inosinate and glutamate, layering another nucleotide source onto an already synergistic dashi, pushing the umami further than kombu and bonito alone could reach. Number 1, Yuki's own bowl. Not a garnish, not a finishing touch. This was the combination she came back to more than any other. A clean shio tare, a kombu, and katsuobushi dashi built at that patient 60 to 85 degree handshake, and 1 small spoon of her scorched garlic oil stirred through at the end. Nothing more. Here's why it works. Every mechanism in this video, the temperature control, the timing, the separation of tare and broth, exists to let glutamate and inosinate finally meet at full strength, and her bowl was simply the cleanest version of that idea. So there it is, 28 tricks, and everyone comes back to the same idea, glutamate meeting inosinate or guanylate, stacked patiently until a bowl tastes bigger than the sum of its ingredients. My grandmother Yuki never called any of it science. She just called it Tuesday. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, a bowl of ramen, even the cheapest one in your pantry, has room for that same care. Share this with someone who needs a better bowl of ramen. Tell me your favorite trick in the comments and subscribe for more of what Yuki taught me.